Hi, everyone. Alena here, and I am here today with Vanessa from Right to Fitness. And I'm so excited to have her on today because I got to meet her over the last, what has it been, a year?
Yeah, about a
A
year.
year. And
Yeah.
her or myself and my daughter work out with her. And not only is she an amazing fitness instructor, but she is an amazing business owner and just like the most genuinely good person that you will ever meet. So I'm so excited to have her on today and get to know her a little bit better today. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for the awesome introduction. That was great. That was a good
Yeah.
intro.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all true. So tell me a little bit about how you even got into fitness. Has that been a part of your life forever, or is that something that you transitioned to at like a point of stress or something else that happened in your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I always was active in high school, played a ton of sports, but much like a lot of people, that doesn't translate into college. So, obviously went to college. That's, a big life change,
Hmm.
leaving and not having that routine and structure anymore. And, at that point, towards the end of my freshman year of college, I did have some pretty like traumatic life events happen. Um, just like a slew of things, a lot of like family dynamic stuff that like really threw me through a loop. And what I once knew like my family unit to be wasn't anymore, or was like being really challenged. And honestly, at that time, I had turned to alcohol a lot.
Mm.
You're in that environment, and like, that seems to be like the social norm to go out and, drink, all the things.
Yep.
And what I came to find is obviously is, newsflash, alcohol is not the best way to deal with your stress and
Absolutely
like
not.
and trauma. So I was like, when I would go out, I would become like super emotional, or just like, obviously binge drinking, highly like emotional, and like all of these feelings that I was having, like trying to deal with like all this family trauma, was like coming out in like not a good way.
Yeah.
And it was like, I remember there being like a specific night where I was like, well, I can't, first of all, like, you know, and maybe this is not the best way to look at it, but at the time it was like what I was thinking is like, I'm affecting like my friends' experience
Hmm.
because they were out wanting to have fun and like
Yeah.
have a good time. And I was like, I'm crying, I'm upset, just all of the things. So I was like, I can't, this isn't jiving. So when my friends would go out, I would just like go to the gym like late at night, and
Hmm.
thank goodness like campuses have their gyms late, or open super late. And so I would just like be in the gym for like 2-3 hours, like, figuring out how to lift and what
Yeah.
that looked like. And so yeah, it was really like, I always refer to that as kind of like, I mean, it really was like a lifesaver for me. And
Hmm.
looking back, I mean, this has been, oh my gosh, well, I graduated in 2012, so 10
Hmm.
years plus ago. Unfortunately, my sister took a different path and
Hmm.
did fall into like, addiction and some of those things. And so looking back, I'm like, wow, it was like truly a lifesaver, because I think when you're faced with those traumas, you kind of have like two
Yep.
paths. And I certainly did a lot more work outside of like just fitness, a lot of counseling, a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of like where my love for fitness came. And then of course, at school, I was going to school to be a health and PE teacher. So
Oh,
it
okay.
kind
So
of,
it all
yeah,
fit
yeah, it
together.
kind of like all fit together. And
Yeah,
all,
there's so many good points in there where what amazing self-awareness that you even saw that you were kind of spewing your
yeah,
trauma
yeah.
on everybody and you're like, this isn't okay. Because most
Hmm.
people spend many, 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 many years spewing their
Hmm.
trauma on everybody around them if they ever get a hold of that. So
Hmm.
that is absolutely incredible that you were able
Yeah.
to recognize that at such a young age, because let's face it, college, we are still babies, and I can't believe we're left to our own devices at
I
that
know.
age.
I
That's
know.
wild. And so I love that you were able to shift the alcohol into the physical activity. And you're
Hmm.
exactly right. We need lots of tools.
Hmm.
And I mean, I even think that there is that time and place to let loose and have fun. And if it involves drinking, great. If it involves just going out and having a good dinner and dancing, that's great too. But yeah, you
Hmm.
got to throw in the therapy, the self-work, the good friends, just all of those different aspects to be a fully healthy, functioning person.
Yeah. And I think even for me, like if I look back, I think there was probably a point even with fitness that I took that to the extreme
Yep.
too, like being in there for 3 hours, being overly obsessive with food, being like obsessed kind of with the way that I look and my physique. And that
Mhm.
really for me was where I could control a part of my
Yep.
life too. So like even being doing this for, over 10 years, like that whole relationship with even fitness, although is healthy, has changed a ton for me as well, because I do recognize that there's a balance there, and
Yes.
that it was shifting at some point, like into an unhealthy way. And I do remember my mom being like, like really concerned, like, you're very thin and are you eating
Mhm.
enough? And at the time it's like, yeah, mom, I'm fine. Like I'm healthy, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And although, like, thankfully, I was never like diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I did have like some patterns of like disordered eating. And like
Mhm.
looking back at that, it's like, okay, yeah, I mean, there definitely was still some like struggle with, although I chose maybe what one would think would be a healthier path to deal with
Yeah.
that. There was
Oh,
still
yeah.
like a balance there,
For sure.
and
You can
things.
turn
Yeah.
healthy things into unhealthy things.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
see
Yeah.
that a lot because I do the ultras, and that's an extreme sport. And so
Hmm.
people will trade one addiction. So that might be alcohol or drug addiction or sex addiction or shopping. And then they're like, oh, let me do this. Let me get into running. And then
Hmm.
instead of doing a 5K, it becomes marathons. And then the marathons become the 50Ks and then the 100
Hmm.
milers. And you can ruin
Hmm.
your relationships and your family and your life by training every single day, by spending entire weekends out running 100 milers. So, yes, on the surface, it's like, oh, this is such a great thing. But in reality, you're ruining all of your relationships. So, yes,
Yeah.
it can all go too far.
Yeah, most definitely. And then, and I think it's also can be a distraction of like
Hmm.
dealing with stuff. So like
Yep.
although I was using fitness to like manage stress and all of the things, it was like I also was overly obsessed with like counting calories,
Hmm.
and that eventually led to like a bodybuilding show, and that put me through some like serious weird health stuff. And like it wasn't until after I went through all of that where I was like, okay, why am I doing this? And what am
Hmm.
I using this to like suppress essentially, and then
Yes.
like having to go through, and then I'm like, okay, I need some counseling. I need to like get some stuff out. And yeah, I mean, it's a very long journey, and
It is.
everybody's is a little bit different, but yeah, I mean,
And I
yeah.
think though, whenever you have that long journey, then you can help people even more. I
Hmm.
help a lot of people with quote unquote weight loss, but, so they show up wanting to lose weight or have a healthier relationship between their mind and their body.
Hmm.
But ultimately, there's things below the surface of that. And so when we can actually get into those traumas, those past hurts, and move through those, then we can have that healthier relationship with exercise, with food, with our bodies.
Hmm.
And I love thinking about it as what's the why?
Hmm.
Why does this feel important to me at this time? And really getting honest with yourself, because I think most of us are pretty delusional
Yeah,
and lie to
it's a hard.
ourselves.
Yeah.
So, really getting clear on, okay, this is why this feels important right now, and going with that. And I think I would love to talk about kind of that toxic weight loss,
Hmm.
fitness industry piece too, because that's something, I'm a lot older than you. So I've
Yeah.
actually been through even a longer time through that. And, I've done the MLMs where it is the nutrition products and the weight loss. And I was always, because of my background, I was always so careful to talk about that it is okay to want to lose weight, but you don't have to lose weight. You
Hmm.
can take these products to feel healthier and feel better, but it doesn't always have to be about looking a certain way.
Hmm.
And that goes with the exercise and the nutrition, and just making sure, again, that why
Mhm.
does this feel important to you? And, I've been through so many ups and downs in my weight between pregnancy and then grief and then injuries. And so it's a constantly a moving target of
Mhm.
figuring out what that is going to all look like together. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that piece of
Yeah,
it.
this is a oh man, it's so deep. Like
Yeah.
this goes like there's so many layers to this, but you know, part of what I value and a big part of like why I do what I do is to educate people. I mean, that's really where
Mhm.
my background came from, is obviously being a health teacher and wanting to educate people to have the tools to like do things on their own. But when you get into the fitness world, so I since have quit teaching. So I'm not teaching, I'm not a health and PE teacher anymore. I did that for about 7 years and then decided like my passions were beyond what the school system would allow allow me to really
Mhm.
integrate into the school. But I'm still educating, which has been great, just a different population.
Yeah.
But what's really difficult about that is if you are in the fitness world or all social media, if you follow fitness influencers or all of the things, it's really hard to like not compare yourself to that, or what she looked like. Even for me, like I've had to find this like really crazy balance with like putting myself out there, obviously, to like grow my business and like help women, but also like protecting my own mental sanity and not
Yeah.
being like always like, I don't know, like making videos or like, cause you get into that, like you compare
Mhm.
yourself of like other fitness people. But, um, yeah, it's just, it can be so toxic. And that's so much what I hate about, I don't want to say hate about what I do, but when people hear, oh, I'm a personal trainer or a nutrition coach, I feel like it's like lumped into that. Maybe they don't even recognize it, but just that
Mhm.
toxicity of like what that is. And it's really hard to even explain that. And then when I work with people, it's so much more than just for weight loss, and
Yeah.
I same with you, Alena. Like I really talk to them about their why and celebrate the
Mhm.
small wins. And if it's not weight loss, if it's, hey, I had less drinks this weekend, or
Mhm.
I didn't binge,
Yeah.
last night because I ate more vegetables. Like those are the things that I truly like to focus on, because as you're mentioning, like weight isn't so, I mean, of course there are the things you need to do to manage your weight, eat more vegetables, drink water, sleep, all of the things, but you can't always have all of those things all of the time, because life just doesn't work in that way,
No, it
it's
does
just,
not.
yeah. So it's like, if people can leave and have tools to just be healthy, to like feel better,
Yeah,
to, I
to
don't
sleep
know,
better.
to
Yeah,
sleep better.
to
Yeah.
have
I
better
mean, that,
relationships. It all intertwines. And,
yeah.
the one thing that I just thought of that just came to me as we were talking is there's, I see it, because I was in that nutrition world and because I've been in
Mhm.
fitness for so long, I almost see a toxicity both ways, where it's
Yeah.
outside in, where the general public feels like they can now judge you as a fitness person about like, are you really that physically fit? Because I
Mhm.
don't know, I see some bulges there, which
Mhm.
is like horrifying. And
Mhm.
then also that inside out where, the trainers themselves are carrying some maybe patriarchal views or unrealistic views. I saw that a lot with men trying to coach women, and they're like, well, just eat better. And it's like, I am eating so healthy, but it's still not working because women's bodies are so complex.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
yeah. What are your
It's
thoughts on that outside in, where like the general public feels like they now have the right to judge you as a fitness professional? Because I'd never really thought about that.
Yeah, it's heavy, and it's something that like obviously, like me and my husband run this together, and he's been like wildly supportive of just my feelings through all of this, because a big part of selling what we do is like being in the public eye and posting
Mhm.
on social media and like finding avenues to get more eyes on like right to fitness and how it can help you. And so that's such a fine balance for me. I remember specifically like when this really changed for me is a big part of our growth in our business. I was getting ready for a wedding, right? So Derek and I were getting married. It was through COVID, so like things were just very different in terms of like the time I had available to train. Just a lot of things were different.
Mhm.
And I was probably like I was very lean. I was, all of the things. It was just a different time. And after that, we got married. I was like, more flexible with food, and, just naturally I was both at a healthy weight in both times I'm describing. But I remember I hired a photographer because we were getting ready to sell an ebook. So I wanted some pictures for this ebook just to obviously put it together. And I remember like seeing those photos and I was so upset. And I was very healthy, in both, but I
Mhm.
wasn't like as lean. You couldn't see the muscle striations. You
Mhm.
couldn't see my core, all those things. And I remember being like really upset about it. And at that time I told Derek, I was like, I just can't do this. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to do this. Like, it's not helpful for me to like constantly be putting myself out there, because
Mhm.
then I'm like but also too on that, it's like the flip side of it is like, I do need to do that and be
Mhm.
okay with that too,
Yeah.
So it was like, it's just always been such a balance with that. But yeah, I mean, it's a crazy environment, because I do feel like a lot of fitness people feel like they do have to like look a certain way to like
Mhm.
to be into fitness, which is
Yeah.
like absurd,
It is. It really is absurd because, and I have struggled with my eating, with my body. I can remember all the way back to 6th grade,
Mhm.
starting that very toxic path with
Mhm.
food and how I viewed myself. And, um, so I'll line up at a start line for a race and be like, oh, I got to be more fit than that person. And then they kick my butt, because they're
Mhm.
powering up hills and they're bombing down hills.
Mhm.
And so being in a world where thinness doesn't always equate fitness in the ultra world has
Mhm.
been so beneficial for me, because it's allowed me to call myself out and be like,
Mhm.
stop freaking judging people for their
Mhm.
outside appearance, because that really has very little to do with how fit they are on the inside, what their heart looks like, what their muscles look
Mhm.
like, how strong they are. Because I've talked to you about losing fat. I'm very strong, but right now I have this layer of fat, and I know that there's mental and emotional pieces to that. There's the pieces of having the chronic infection with Lyme's. And then there's also just, I'm not willing to be as strict
Yeah.
with my
Yeah.
food that my body requires.
Mhm.
And so it is just letting go of that self-judgment. And then
Mhm.
when we put ourselves out there, being okay. So if somebody does call me out and be like, you're looking a little fluffy, like, and you're talking about doing all this big stuff. And it's like, yeah, because there's all these factors that play into that. And so what does that mean for you? Get out there, do it
Mhm.
anyways. You don't have to be a certain size to
Mhm.
set a goal and to do, the things that light you up. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, so many thoughts in what you're saying. I also feel like, on the flip side of things, and this is where that balance comes into play. If you
mhm.
do have like serious health conditions, it's like almost like you don't have to be a certain size to like be healthy.
Yeah.
Also with that sidebar, it's like if there are things that are detrimental to your health and your doctor is saying, might be beneficial for you to like change some habits to like decrease your fat tissue,
Yeah.
that's important to recognize too.
Absolutely.
So it's
Yes.
kind of like,
Mhm.
and like you said, I love what you said about like the moving target, because it isn't a one size fits all approach to, my journey, your journey, whatever anyone else is going through. But I think a lot of the positive things that are current with the fitness world is that it is really a lot of more about strength. There you see
Mhm.
so many women just like, let's get strong, and powerlifting, and like that, I think has been a big shift in just women's health in general, just
Oh,
talking
yeah.
more about being strong. So that's been like really, I think, a really positive thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely love that, because I'm so old. I've transitioned through the 90s low fat
Hmm.
aerobic um era,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
into um just a very different way, and into the more of the strength and the lifting. And because I remember I was in high school in the 90s, and there was me and one other girl that would lift. That was it.
Hmm.
No other girls ever set foot in that weight room. And even at the gym, outside of the school, it was Shodan Fitness in Evansburg, and
Mhm.
I would go and lift, and all the other females would be in the studio doing the step aerobics and the,
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah.
which I also love that. So
Yeah.
like, give me a Jane Fonda workout video all day
Yeah.
long. Richard Simmons, loved it all. But also for women's health, strength and muscle mass is so important so that we can keep our bones healthy and our hips where they need to be, and we can fall and bounce and
Mhm.
not break
Yeah.
something. And
Yeah.
just, there's just so many aspects to that make me so happy that we have moved into the strength era, and that's
Mhm.
what we focus on
Yeah.
way more.
Yeah. And even for me, like, that mentality has shifted for me as well. I remember, like, obviously I got into a lot of this, like through strength training, and then doing a bodybuilding competition. That was a lot of like strength, strengthening, bringing out certain muscle groups. But, as I've transitioned out of that and I'm working with women, I've saw a quote, or it was just like, somebody else had said, like, find your fit, and
Hmm.
I think for me, that's even challenging because what works for me might not work for you in terms of like, now there's as science that says like do resistance training, do X
Hmm.
amount of like aerobic and all those things. But it's like when I approach my clients, it's all about like, what can you do sustainably? And that does require a component of enjoyment. Like if you
Hmm.
don't enjoy lifting weights, then it doesn't make any sense for me to give you 3 days of strength training, because you're not going to do that. And the goal is
Yes.
to like increase movement. So like I do have a ton of clients that we just do a step goal every day, or we
Hmm.
do a yoga, just like some stretching. Maybe it's just like, okay, throughout your day I want you to do 100 body weight squats, just
Hmm.
increasing that movement. And that's been a big shift for me as well, because it's like I have to recognize that what I enjoy and what works for me might not be realistic, or someone else might not like to work
Hmm.
out like I do. So um yeah, I mean, of course, I'm always encouraging resistance training because,
Yeah,
as you
we
mentioned,
know.
super good. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Super good for like bone strength, joint and ligament health, you know, muscle atrophy, which
Yeah.
happens at a very high rate after the age of 30. So like all of those things, which is why resistance training is so important. But, at the end of the day, finding your fit and finding what
Hmm.
you love to do is really supersedes all of that, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same for me. It's like, when we're talking about the mental and emotional well-being piece of people, it's finding what they can do every single day. Because
mhm,
sure, coming to see me 90 minutes, even once a week, there's a lot of other minutes in the week. And most people don't
mhm,
come every week. It's every other, once a month. And so what can you commit to? Is it 5 minutes of breath work? Is it 5 minutes of meditation? Is it some gentle stretching while you breathe and release emotion from your body? Just all of those pieces, it's that consistency. What can be
mhm.
done every single day, or more days than not? And I love that you bring that into your coaching and have those deep conversations about like, okay, what
Yeah.
is actually going to work for you? And let's do that, instead of it being like, this is my program, take it or leave it. And
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
it. Because I do know plenty of trainers that are like, nope, I know this works, so this is what we
Yeah.
have to do. And
Right,
yeah.
right. And that's like, to each their own. If that's how you want to
Hmm.
train, like I think there are people that crave that structure and want
Hmm.
that, but I also feel like the population of I work with all women that I work with, it's just like that approach doesn't work, and oftentimes is like I think it is just like too abrasive, and then it's
Hmm.
like then they can't, and then there's a point of like building like trust, with my
Yeah.
clients. If I'm like, do this or you're out, it's like, well, they're not going to come to me if they are having a bad day,
Yeah.
or like, so there's just a bigger component there that I think is they can leave, and it's like more beneficial to like just approach it in that way, because I, like you're mentioning, I can't work with people forever, unfortunately. So it's like, what do I want them to leave with? It's not like the
Yeah.
most amount of weight loss that I
Hmm.
mean, although everybody typically comes to me for weight loss, it's like, yeah, like let's lose some weight, but in the meantime, let's also like build some like habits and routine that you can stick with
Yep.
for forever. because this isn't done, in 12 weeks, 16 weeks, however long we're together, like, let's, like it's, you got to keep going,
Yeah.
and which is like a daunting thing in itself to like think about, like to keep
Yes.
it going, but
For forever
yeah,
and ever
yeah,
and ever.
yeah,
You mean I
exactly.
can't eat healthy for a day and
Yeah,
be
right,
I get
right.
so mad. I'm like 3 days of like perfect eating and
Mhm.
like don't and I'm like, what? Like it's like, come on,
Oh, I
Alena.
know.
Like 3 days. You just like did insane things for 3 weeks.
Right.
There's one thing that I wanted to touch on a little bit more is that non-judgment piece and being
Mhm.
honest, because that's one thing, I have people come for hypnosis and weight loss. And like I said, I don't just do blanket weight loss. We're getting
Mhm.
into what's happening below the surface. Is it eating patterns? Is it binge eating? Is it disordered eating? Is there
Mhm.
trauma that happened? And or is food your way of managing your emotions or stuffing
Mhm.
down your emotions? There it's so layered.
Mhm.
But I always make sure that I tell people I am not expecting perfection. I'm
Mhm.
absolutely not expecting perfection. We need to have honest conversations. If you leave here and you binge every single day, I need to know that because something we did either hit a button, hit a wound, or is not working well for you. So
Mhm.
unless we have that honesty and non-judgment policy back and forth, it's not going to work well. And that's one thing that I really admire in you is that, you know, coming to you myself, but also bringing my teen daughter to you.
Mhm.
I absolutely don't ever want her to feel judged or feel bad or feel guilty or any of those things. So I really respect I that you just carry that's your whole persona. Like,
Mhm.
I know that I could come tell you something crazy that I ate or
Yeah.
drank, and you'd be like, okay, so like, what can we do different next time?
Yeah.
Or like, okay, let's regroup and
Mhm.
reassess. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'd love to talk about that, like holding people accountable, yet not judging, because there
Yeah.
is a balance between that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something, obviously, as I've been doing this for quite some time, about 4 or 5 years now, like that's a skill that I've learned. I think that's a
Hmm.
skill that you have to like fine tune. But yeah, I just typically ask a lot of questions, and it's like, okay, like no big deal. Like one
Hmm.
day of like whatever it is that happened, no big deal. But like let's talk about it and figure out what we can do different next time, or like why. I ask why a lot. Like,
Hmm.
okay, tell me a little bit more about that. Like let's talk through that. Or I have a lot of girls that will be like, I ate X, Y, and Z and I feel guilty. And I'm always like, okay, well, did you binge less? Like, were
Hmm.
you able to stop yourself and say, like, okay, I feel satisfied with, one cookie instead of five cookies
Yeah.
this time? Like, to me, and I'm always like, to me, that's progress, if you're able to like
Hmm.
be in that space. And so, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a skill to fine tune, but like the goal with health and fitness is just problem solving. And I try to really encourage and want to empower my clients to do that, because it's not going to be perfect every day. But if you can stop and be like we had talked about early in this, like be self-reflective and be like
Hmm.
honest with yourself and have those skills to be like, okay, why did this happen? Like there's usually a why. It's usually you're stressed out, you didn't get enough sleep, you
Hmm.
didn't eat enough vegetables with lunch. There's always like a reason why. And finding that barrier to why whatever outcome didn't happen for you is like where the money is in this
Yeah.
whole thing. Because if you can pinpoint that and have honest conversation with yourself, then you essentially can like do something different, or like whatever that situation is.
Yeah.
And it's always super helpful to have some like an outsider looking in. And so,
Oh, for sure.
when I'm talking to these girls and they're like, I don't know why it happened, it's like, okay, your weeks are really stressful. You don't get up for breakfast in the morning. Like, can we try to food prep the night before? Like, can we make a shake and throw it in the freezer? And just so
Mhm.
having that organic conversation, is truly like what my coaching program is, right? It's
Yeah.
not like about the fitness. It's not like about what food you're eating. It's like when shit's going wrong, how can we like stop and like take a breath and figure
Yeah.
out how to do it differently next time, And that's
Yeah.
just really how I approach this whole journey and like every single client. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and that is a really beautiful thing. I love the idea that, yeah, it's just a problem to solve. And with a little bit of self-reflection and maybe some outside perspective, we can
Yeah.
see the solutions to do better next time or do
Mhm.
different next time. And
Yeah.
I love that. And yeah, there's just so much goodness in just having those honest, real conversations with people and talking
Mm.
it through. It'd be interesting to explore with the people that are opposed to lifting or certain types of exercise, because my mind's always turning like, why
Yeah.
are they so opposed to that? Like, was there something that they got embarrassed in a weight room once, or
Mhm.
somebody said something when they were trying to lift or corrected them? I've been mansplained to plenty of times at the gym,
Oh,
and I'm
yeah.
like, but
Yeah.
I think I'm old enough to be your mom. Like, don't tell me what to do, you
Yeah.
know? But
Yeah.
so I just wonder if some of the, especially the ladies that are my age and older, it was very taboo. We were raised at a time when the only people lifting were do you remember, oh my gosh, what's it called? Where they fought with oh my gosh, they just did a documentary on it. There was like they did all the obstacles and then they would fight, and oh my gosh, everybody like that is my age is like
I
screaming
think
it
I know what
out.
you're talking about. Yeah.
Like, those were the ladies that were fit and had lifted, and it was the steroid era. And so
Mhm.
that's what I always would hear is like, I don't want to get bulky. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
do I look, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I'm a little bulkier than most, but that's just my body type. And
Mhm.
so that idea that
Yeah.
yeah, so I just wonder what it is that holds them back sometimes. Like, is there some
Yeah.
kind of trauma, or something that somebody said that hurt their feelings underneath it?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I, life experiences really like mold us, right? And like I always come back to like perspective and what my reality might not be your reality because we've had different life experiences and our perspective might be different. But I know a lot of times I hear so Derek typically does like the sales calls for,
Mhm.
bringing people on board. And a lot of times they do have these women do have bad experiences with other trainers or other programs where they're promised X, Y, and Z and they don't get the support that they need, or they're given just some cookie cutter program that has them lifting 5 days a week for an hour and a half. And that's unrealistic for them. And then they don't see results. And so like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I don't think we can say everybody's had that bad experience, but I'm
No.
sure a lot of people have. I mean, even for me, who when I walk into a gym, I know what I'm doing. Like I've still had people try to I don't know, try to change what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
with that too, I appreciate that you feel comfortable and confident with your daughter and you coming into the gym because that's something from a coaching perspective. I try not to overcorrect form because oftentimes like form and technique will come as you get more comfortable doing the movement. Your body's just not used to it. And where wouldn't want anyone to be doing something that's unsafe. Like if
Yeah.
something's like truly going to hurt them, like I would obviously step in, but I think a big part of like being a supportive coach is like not overcorrecting because that no one wants to feel like they're constantly doing something wrong. That's not a way to like
Yes.
build somebody up. So it's like
Yeah.
let them work through it and like typically like in a squat, it's like yeah, your body's not used to doing that, but after a few weeks, like your form will improve, and that's usually how it goes. So um yeah, that's just like a big part of it too. And again, something I try not to do even in my online coaching. It's like okay, yeah, that looks like might be a little bit off, but let's focus on like, wow, that's a really colorful plate. I love that you added vegetables in there. Next time, maybe let's add some more protein, And so always just trying to like reiterate that like there are wins really in every,
Yeah.
if you're making an effort, there's probably a win there
Yeah.
along the way that you can highlight and focusing on that. So,
Yeah. And even, so I know for me, in working with people and doing the regression to cause piece of what is holding them back from
mhm,
something, it can even be something that somebody said. So they didn't even have to be in the gym and somebody critiquing them or saying
mhm,
something. It could be their mom commenting on somebody else. And then they internalize that and they're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to get bulky. I don't want to,
mhm,
so
mhm,
it's so interesting because there's so much stuff that just worms its way into our brains, and
Mhm.
we're not even always consciously aware of that. But I
Mhm.
like that you just have those well-rounded conversations and really just do what they need you to do. But
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
show was the American Gladiators.
yeah, I was gonna say something warriors, but I knew that
Yeah,
wasn't right, but
yeah.
I knew what you're talking about. That's funny.
I was like, I love that show. I was
Yeah.
obsessed with that show. But
Yeah.
obviously I was always into lifting and fitness and things and didn't care that, what
Mhm.
other people were saying. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's what you just said about like your parents saying and doing
Mhm.
certain things. Like I don't have children yet, but I'm sure I don't know, like if you could provide insight on this of like how that feels to really watch what you say around
Oh
daughter, your
gosh. Yeah.
daughter and like how you because it's, I have bad days, bad body image days
Mhm.
as everybody does. And it's like I can, vent to my husband and like that feels safe because it's like, he's not
Yeah,
as
he's
impressionable when
mhm.
he's, but I imagine with like a teenage daughter or son really that like watching how you talk about your own body or talk about food or, just all of the things that is just so delicate, when you're going through that.
Yeah, and it is very, very delicate because I definitely don't want to instill my body and food issues into my children, boys
Mhm.
and girls.
Mhm.
But it is necessary to have conversations about body type and taking care of your body and paying attention to the types of foods that you're eating, not just for
Mhm.
calories, but just for inflammation, for
Mhm.
overall health. Like my body is so easily inflamed, and that's for many reasons, but I want to set my kids up for long-term health. And,
Mhm.
so avoiding processed foods and sugars
Mhm.
is important. And I want them to be aware of that. Yet I don't want to create a guilt or a shame around eating a cookie or,
Mhm.
having ramen. And so
Mhm.
it is a constant balance of, okay, so if you want the ramen, let's have a fruit or a vegetable with it.
Mhm.
It's okay to have the ice cream, but maybe let's not have the whole pint of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, we had an incident where, not an incident, but like just an instance where I was trying to talk to Isadora about, look, I shouldn't have said her name, it's a fine. Um, her body type and how, she does have to be aware of certain foods, certain things. And she was like, I'm sorry, I'm fat. And I was like, nowhere in there did I
Yeah.
say that you were fat. Did not
Yeah.
say that, wasn't even thinking that. I was just saying that you are a taller girl. You have this certain, she's just a bigger built person. There's no
Mhm.
judgment around that. There's no good or bad. It was
Mhm.
just, I was trying to have a neutral conversation,
Mhm.
but
Yeah,
the way she interpreted what I was saying, and it went down a bad path. And
sure.
um to try to reel that back and just have that conversation and not allow it to spiral into shame and guilt and all of those things is very tricky. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure of that. And I think like, that even, if we can take that same concept and like, when I'm working with these women, like it's so delicate because it's like I am like hyper aware of how I phrase things, especially in a message. A lot of what I do is
Mhm.
I do have video conferences with my clients, but most of the time it's just through message. And that can be oh man, I've like typed erase because I
Mhm.
don't want it to come across like I'm scolding you or like I'm saying, you read between the lines. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like really, really, really tricky. And, a lot of these women that I'm working with don't have the best, body image or
Mhm.
relationship with food. And so, it's just like, again, holding them accountable, but also like creating a safe space where it's like, you can make mistakes, but we do like coming back to your goals, like what do you if this is your goal, we've got to like change some things.
Yeah.
And at one point we did have a part-time coach who had two little girls and I would oftentimes consult with her like how do you talk to them about that? And I
Mhm.
remember she said like, we do talk about it and for her, it was like, there are foods that we can eat all of the time, some
Mhm.
of the time. And that's kind of how
Mhm.
she categorized it. And I really appreciated that. I was like, that's a good way to look at it, because you
Yeah.
can't be overly restrictive. Obviously, like
Yeah.
those foods are going to be in our life, like ice
Yeah.
cream, all the things that we should watch and kind of limit. But, yeah, it's tricky. It's a tricky world to navigate.
Yeah, and you don't yeah, you wanna have the conversation in a healthy way to where they don't then use it as a binge, or they're hiding
Mhm.
it, or, going to a
Right.
friend's house and then eating so much of it. Because I've
Mhm.
definitely known people where their parents don't allow it in the house at all.
Yeah.
And so then as soon as they go to a friend or a family that has it, then they're just like, guzzling it. So
Yeah.
that's not healthy either. But yet I
Right.
also don't want my kids drinking soda on a
Yeah.
regular basis because it's toxic. Like there
Yeah.
are bad
Yeah.
chemicals in that.
Right.
Um and yeah, and I think too, for girls, talking about endocrine disruptors and hormone disruptors is a really
Mhm.
important conversation.
Yeah.
In the dairy, in um, some of the other chemicals, in the things that we put on our body, on the things that we
Mhm.
wear. If that's disrupting your hormones, that's science. That's
Mhm. Yeah.
something that's
Yeah.
going to affect how your body functions. And so it's just awareness and understanding, and
Mhm.
hopefully being able to have honest conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is like such a hard skill for a lot of people. And even for me, like coaching has really pushed me out of my comfort zone to like ask tough questions and,
Mhm.
approach people in a way that they might feel uncomfortable. But, like if you're open to that and you can like battle through that, like
Mhm.
there's usually a good outcome at the end. It's
Yeah.
just like battling through that storm. But
Yeah, you can make people
yeah.
uncomfortable with love.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah. And
because discomfort, uncomfortable is pushing beyond
mhm.
those places that make us that push us into making the changes that we actually want to
Right.
make in our life. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I also like coming back to what you said about not having that food in your house, or eliminating that completely. I always like push my clients too, like a lot of times they get comfortable with having the same breakfast and lunch, and
mhm.
that's fine if that works for them. And there is a lot of like research that backs like less food variety, people are able to manage their weight
Mhm.
a little
Oh
bit
yeah.
better. But in the same regard, I'm like, do you feel like satisfied with what you're
Mhm.
eating? Because you should feel happy or enjoy the meal that you're having. Or again, that's going to be short lived when you have access to those high sugar, high fat, high processed foods, and you will binge. So I always encourage them, like, have like 100-calorie pack of chips if that's like your thing, or if you want to like finish your night with like a cookie or something like that. Like, let's just work it into your day
Yeah.
today and make that align with your goals, so that, I can still have these things, right? I do need to make changes, likely, not to sugarcoat anything. If someone's
Mhm.
wanting to lose weight, they typically have to make changes to do that. But let's also not like go to the extreme and like be totally restrictive and not understand how you can still work those things in on occasion and still work towards your health and fitness goals. So that's always like a weird balance too, of like, I love what you're eating, but are you happy with what you're eating? Like,
Yeah.
as we talk about that a lot, because like, again, like you should feel satisfied after a meal, because let's say you eat, I don't know, some meal and you're like, I'm still not satisfied. Well, then you're likely going to go grab
Exactly.
a burger. And so
Yeah.
then
We're
that's
doubling
really,
up on a
yeah,
meal,
yeah,
and
yeah. And
yes.
it's like, so got to figure that out. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like we've touched on like so many important topics
Yeah.
and really awesome ways, and just such a good conversation. And we really didn't even get into you, but I think people got a good feel for who you
Yeah.
are by how we talk through those things.
Yeah.
And so yeah, if you would talk a little bit about your business, how people can work with you, because there is the in-person option, which is in
Mhm.
Western Pennsylvania, but also online coaching is available too.
Yeah. I was like really worried we weren't going to have enough to talk about, but here we are like almost an hour in and we're
Oh,
just still
always.
cruising.
I
So
could talk
yeah.
to people for 3 hours.
Yeah. We might just have to do another one, but,
Yeah.
yeah, no. So, I used to own a facility in Western Pennsylvania as well. And, at the time, anyway, life happened. We were going to move, didn't end up moving. But during that time, we were like, how can we reach more people? And that has always been the goal of like, how can we help more people? Because obviously in these small towns, it's like a
Mhm.
small population of people. And also with that, when the in-person is great, but a lot of people, like you said, Alena, like need that more support, like outside of their day.
Mhm.
There's a lot of more time other than an hour in a gym where,
Mhm.
you need support. So that was kind of where we got into the online world, because we were like, how can we help the most people and be the most supportive? And that's always been like kind of like our value and like our core idea of at Right to Fitness. It's like, how can we really support people? And so, yeah, so essentially like we work with women all over the world, which is pretty cool, typically in the United States, but I have some clients in, oh my gosh, I've had some clients in like London. I've had some clients, all the way in California.
Oh,
So
wow.
just like all over the place. So, typically when people come into our program, so they, there's options 12, 16, or 24 weeks. And then we just kind of bring them in and talk about what they need and what they're going for. And then, I create a custom program for them. And that a lot of times is just like focusing on like those basic habits that we talked about. And then where they learn the most is like, in the day to day. So from that point on, I just kind of, support them day in and day out, keep them accountable, kind of check in on those habits that we've created together and the goals that we've created together, and kind of see where they're at. So, yeah, that's kind of where, I
Yeah.
don't know if that answered your question,
Yeah,
but
it did for sure. Yeah.
yeah,
And
that's what
so
I do.
I'll have your information in the show notes so that people
Mhm.
can check you out. And what do you do to take good care of yourself every day? Because,
Oh yeah, that's a
we
good question.
didn't really, I mean, we talked about business, but not
Hmm.
talked about it. And
Hmm.
running your own business is it's amazing in so many
Hmm.
ways, but it's also very, very stressful.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I'm coaching and helping people with their own mental and emotional well-being and so many
Mhm.
aspects. But sometimes that means that I'm not taking good care of my mental
Yes.
and emotional needs. So how do
Yeah.
you take good care of you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think a big part of, I mean, of course, it's always been like a learning curve, but a big part of what helps me is just like routine and committing to like what I like to call like blackout times, where I'm like not on my phone, where I'm
Mhm.
not doing work, where I am doing some, whatever that is, whether it's taking a nap, going to the gym, like having time to like whatever that is, whatever I feel like my body needs. So, I mean, and that's been a big learning curve, when you first start a business, and with any job, there's not a perfect job out there. There's stressors with that comes
Yes.
along with any job, but um yeah, I mean, so like really just shutting off my work at, 5 p.m. It's like I'm done. I'm done with
Mhm.
my clients, and I tell them that, like I'm super honest, like after 5 p.m. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'll get to you
Yeah.
tomorrow. Taking like weekends where I'm really detached from my phone and, not doing work. Yeah, and then of course like working out, I that's a big, still has been such a big part of my mental health and my stress relief. And that's been a really amazing shift for me, that I'm not just working out to look a certain way. It's like I
Mhm.
need this to feel
Good.
relaxed at the end of the day and
Mhm.
like manage my stress. So I work out or do some sort of purposeful movement at least 5 days a week, and that's just what works for me and what makes me feel best. And then sleep is huge for me too,
Mhm.
like making sure I have a good nighttime routine. And I that is something I still struggle with, because I'm like naturally a night owl. Like I'll stay up all
Yeah.
night. I love
Yeah.
that. But so I really have to like force myself. Like I've
Yeah.
even, I don't know if you have like on my phone, I put like it's on sleep mode so I can't like access things. I
Mhm.
have to really like, okay, 9:30, I'm gonna start my nighttime routine, go
Yep.
read in bed. And I do, I'm not perfect with that. I do like flirt with that. Well, I could stay up, I don't have anything till 8 a.m. tomorrow. So I definitely flirt with that. But sleep for me is like oh man, if I have a good night's sleep, I
Mm.
have a killer next day. And if I don't, it's like a catalyst just for like disaster.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's my biggest I protect my sleep at all costs, and
mhm.
basically that's something that I talk with every single client about, because if your sleep is bad, it just makes everything else
Oh
worse.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
most people do not have healthy sleep patterns.
No.
So
Well, yeah, I
it's
mean,
so
and I think
important.
I think I think there's been so much of a narrative where like work harder, work, you can
Mhm.
only be successful if you're working 16-hour days,
Yeah.
being almost rewarded in a sense for like going above and beyond in a job, maybe not financially, but like,
Mhm.
that like fills our cup in some way.
Yeah.
But then like our sleep and like other relationships and other things are suffering from that. And I think that's really, and I don't know. I mean, I can only, as a woman, I can only speak as a woman, but I think for a lot of women, there's that struggle to like be as successful as men or like, you know, go higher in the business or
Mhm.
whatever, because it has been such a challenge for many, many years. But that's something that like I really talk to my clients about too, because it's like, okay, you're working through your lunch. You're not even taking a 30-minute lunch where
Mhm.
you're like able to go grab a salad or something
Mhm.
that makes you feel good. Like that's not good.
Yeah.
Like you can't
Yeah.
do
We
that,
need
you
to
know what I
regroup.
mean? So yeah, yeah. I mean, and
Yeah.
so that's been a big learning curve and for myself, and I think for a lot of people, it's like that 30 minutes to an hour might seem like you're taking away from something in your life, but usually if you're giving back to yourself,
Yeah.
you'll be able to give so much more in your work or your relationships or whatever that is, because
Yeah.
you feel good and your cup's full and you have energy and like all those things. So, and that's something even for myself, I have to remind myself like, oh, I could work an extra hour, but would I be better served to just like go to the gym, take care of myself? And, it's taken some time, but I am more comfortable like shutting it down
Doing that.
and just
Yeah.
doing that because it does help like a ton.
Oh, I know. I
Yeah.
gotta get better at that because,
Yeah.
whoo, my boundaries are real loosey goosey.
I know. Well, I mean, that's why we hire coaches, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's been plenty of times that I've hired business coaches because
Mhm.
it's hard to keep yourself accountable. Like
Yeah.
you can talk yourself in or out
Oh,
of,
100%.
who
Anything.
else, yeah,
Anything.
yeah, because who else you have to answer to? So I've had a ton of business coaches that, when I started this, they were like, you absolutely need to like shut it down on the weekends, or you
Mhm.
need to be done at 5 p.m. or, kind of challenging me and in that way of like setting some strict boundaries. And yeah,
That's
I've invested
oh
in a
my
lot of
gosh.
business coaches,
Yeah.
a lot of people to like tell me that like,
So answering emails at 10:30 PM,
yeah,
not great?
no,
Or at
yeah.
like 1 AM when I wake up and check my phone? Oh, shoot, I gotta work on that.
Yeah, 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 definitely not. But it's hard though,
Oh,
like,
I
and
know.
especially when you are so like passionate and caring, and like
Yeah.
that's something that like I have to remind myself, like that doesn't mean I care less or I'm less passionate. It's
Mhm.
just like I have to.
Yeah, you have to
I
take
have
care of
to.
yourself too.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think for me, sometimes I just I've had kids for 14 years now. And, so it's just like, if I get that moment, I'm going to take it. Whether it is 1
Yeah.
a.m. or, 5 a.m., it's like, oh, I have a moment to respond to this email. So let me do that instead of having more structure in my day. So it's always a work in progress
Oh
of
yeah.
running a business and taking good care of ourselves in the process.
Oh yeah,
So,
no doubt. Yeah, I mean, it's all really a balancing act, and it's never 100% of the time. That's
no,
just not reality. So I think that's,
no.
yeah.
I was in a it was some Facebook group that I was in, and the lady asked the question of, how do you balance running a business and having a family and taking care? And I was like, is this a joke? And I was not having a great day
Yeah.
because that idea of balance 100% of the time just isn't true.
Mhm.
But how do we do better? How do we take better
Mhm.
care? How do we truly balance it out? But in the real world too. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's a barrier of why Derek and I haven't started a family, just
Hmm.
that fear of like, how does that work? Like, what does that mean for our business? And I know you
Oh yeah.
find new ways, like
Yeah.
you figure it out,
You do.
but it's like, yeah, it's tough. It's a yeah. And also too, like there's a financial aspect too. Like you
Mhm.
gotta feel like you gotta grind to make money and
Yeah.
bring in that next client. And there's
Yeah.
that, fear as well when you're running your own business. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it is a
Absolutely.
balance.
It was so good to talk to you today.
Yeah, you too.
So many nuggets of wisdom in this, things for people to think about and to examine for themselves. And really, I think the biggest thing is, what's your why of anything you do in the business, if you have your own, in your work, but just also in your goals for your fitness and your food and just all of those areas. It
Yeah.
is important to
Yeah.
say, like, okay, why is this important to me and what's it
Yeah.
worth to me to do
And
it?
how do I solve this? Like if
Yeah.
I'm not happy with this, how do I do better? And how do I make time to like solve this problem
Hmm.
that I have, And if you can just allow yourself 10 minutes a day to like think about that and what you can
Hmm.
do to like, just allow yourself that time to
Yeah.
like problem solve and set yourself up for
Yeah.
success. I mean, that's
And
what I
while
can
I'm
advise.
looking at two people right here that are very good at helping people
Yeah.
problem solve and figure things out. So if that's something you're struggling with out there, definitely reach out to either one of us. And we would love to hear from you and love to hear your thoughts and feelings on what we shared. And I thank you all for listening. And please share with anyone else that you feel would benefit as well. Thanks,
Yeah.
Vanessa.
Thanks, Alena.